Welcome to Tell Me a Ghost Story, the late night call-in podcast where we delve into the world of the supernatural and explore the eerie and unexplained. I'm your host, Michelle Newman. This podcast features true stories from our callers that will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning the existence of the afterlife. So grab a cozy blanket, turn down the lights.
All right, my name is Brennan, and I am currently I live in London, Ontario, but this story comes from when I was living in Victoria, BC, which is on the west coast of Canada. So I wrote a book. It's called Strangers of the Place, and it is the paranormal history of my hometown. It's a little town in the mountains in Western Canada. This all started when I began researching the book in 2012. Now, when I got into started researching it, I didn't really believe in ghost stories, which might sound odd for a guy who is writing a book about it, but I felt like, I'm just going to interview people, they'll tell me their stories, I'll write them up, and that's good enough. It is not necessary that I also believe this. In addition to this, at the time, I was the office manager for a consulting company, so I wanted to make sure I didn't come across as a kook, because I still had to exist in a professional capacity. And so I started taking my vacation time, going back to my hometown and interviewing people. I would started at the museum. I had a couple names I'd found from Google searches, old Google pages, and I just started knocking on doors, asking questions, and that's how I researched the whole book. But when I got back from the first trip, I was at work. It was a sunny April morning. So at the time, in this relatively huge office space, it was just me and the receptionist / bookkeeper, and we were having a chat. I was telling her all the stories I had found. She was telling me some of her own from where she grew up. And as we're having this conversation on a lovely April morning, I see this all-black head peek out from behind the coat rack. And it holds there. It holds there just long enough for me to be able to say to myself, okay, that I'm seeing that. That is, I'm not imagining it. And then as I'm trying to hold it together and keep talking to the receptionist, that all black head goes back behind the coat rack and is gone. And I felt this incredible sense of panic because I didn't really believe in this stuff, right? it was fun stories, but I had just seen what I'd seen. And I'd never seen anything like it before. The panic was real, and I felt the color. I saw the color drain from my vision. I was starting to panic, and I really I just crunched down and just didn't show any sign of it, like didn't talk about it, just kept talking to the receptionist, and that was it. So I was like, that's weird, but sure, fine, okay. And I didn't see much more of it. Then about a couple weeks later, a month later, I was at home, and I always like to joke, my wife has grown-up jobs. I always manage to finagle a workplace where I can kind of turn up whenever I feel like it. It's a gift of mine. But she has grown-up jobs. So she had gone to work. I woke up. It was May by this point. It was, again, another bright morning. She had opened the blinds when she left. And I recall rolling over to look at the clock on her side of the bed, and I think I noted the time was 8:30. And I rolled back to my side, and that's when I realized I could see something out of the corner of my left eye. It was like there was someone standing next to me. But that didn't make sense because where I perceived this person to be standing, there was a bedside table. Someone could not stand there. I turned to look at the thing in the corner of my eye, and I saw a shadow in the shape of a man. And before I could react to it, it fell across me in the bed. And when it contacted my skin, I felt electricity throughout my entire body. This doesn't make a lot of sense, but I passed out. It was like I fell back asleep. I woke up about half an hour later, the shadow figure was gone, and I felt fine. maybe a little weird, a little upset by what I had seen, but I thought, well, that's strange. And then I kept moving. Because, of course, like, I had never heard of shadow people at this point. This was not until later that I started my really in-depth paranormal research that I finally heard that term. And I didn't think too much about it, but over the course of the next 2 weeks, I began experiencing the most profound depression I had encountered since I was a teenager. It was as if there was something literally weighing on me, like something just hanging off my neck, pulling me forward. And it lasted for, again, 2 weeks until I provoked an argument with my wife, which is not something I do. Like, I'm not exactly a paragon of good behavior, but I'm not someone who fights for fun. That's just not who I am. But I did, and we had this terrible argument. And after that, it was like it was gone. It was like a boil had popped. And I thought, well, that's weird. But again, I didn't really have a frame of reference for this stuff. My family were not spooky growing up. It's not something, I was raised in the Catholic Church, but it didn't really take. So none of that stuff kind of informed my growing up. As I would come to learn over the course of doing the podcast I do, the Ghost Story Guys, I would come to realize I'd actually had more childhood experiences than I thought, but I had just memory hold all of them. And then a year later, I was in Vancouver for a series of 3 concerts across 4 days. And I had company for the first 2 shows, and then for the third one, I was on my own. And I was renting a room in someone's house. It was an early version of Airbnb. It wasn't Airbnb, but it was something that kind of it was a forerunner to it. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening, which is when I started thinking, it's time for a coffee. And I was reading a book. So I grabbed my book, walked out the front door, and it was, again, a lovely evening in April in Vancouver. And as I was stepping out of this house, I say, "Hey there." And I turned and looked, and there was an elderly First Nations gentleman, elderly Indigenous gentleman. He was wearing a sweatsuit, like a tracksuit. Looked pretty rough. He himself, his skin was pretty rough. He had a gray gym bag over one corner, and he had a wooden cane with orange electrical tape bound around the bottom of it. And I said, "Oh, hey there." He said, "How are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm well, thank you. How are you?" And he said, "Oh, I could do with a coffee as I go along in my travels here," but he said, "Otherwise, I'm well." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. So I'm heading that direction anyways. Walk with me. I'll buy you a coffee." So he fell into step with me, this elderly gentleman, and we got talking. He said, "My name's Dennis. That's what's your name?" So it's Brennen. And I said, "Okay." He's like, "Would you like to know my spirit name?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, man. Go for it." And he said, "Oh, it's Thunderbird Heartstrong." I said, "Okay, cool, sure." He's like, "Would you like to know what yours is?" Of course, the answer was yes. And he said, "Well, when we get to the coffee shop," he said, "I will ask." He said, "Not everyone has one, but when we get there, I will ask." And he went on to explain the significance of his spiritual name to me and explained that Thunderbird, the spirit of Thunderbird, was a thing that actually would visit him from time to time. And he said he was a shaman, and that's why. So we got to the coffee shop, and now I have to admit, I thought this gentleman was homeless. That's kind of how he looked. And I have bought coffees for homeless guys before. We're all only 1 or 2 missed paychecks away from that place. So it pays to be nice to people. Or rather, it's easy to be nice to people. So I figured this is going to follow the pattern where you buy them a coffee, then they ask if they can get something sweet, and then if you go along with that, maybe they ask for a pack of smokes. Instead of him asking for these things, he just said to me, "I'll have what you're having, 2 cream, 1 sugar. I'll see if I can find us a table." I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure, man, fine." He found us a table out front of the Starbucks. And this was on Davie Street, which is a very busy street in Vancouver. And so as I tell you the rest of the story, bear in mind, this happened in front of a busy Starbucks on a busy urban street, and again, between 6 and 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening. And we sat down, and he explained to me, he said, "I'm a shaman, and I've been a shaman since I was X years old," and he told me his whole story. And I thought, I don't ask people for advice all that often anymore. But I thought, I'm going to ask him his advice. So I said, "Look, I'd like to ask you something." And this was after he told me my spirit name. And he asked, he kind of sing-songy thing, and he looked around and he said, he said, you do have one. He said, not everyone does. He said, you're the stone buffalo. He said, stone because you're a fixed point around which things part. You are a source of comfort for people. You're a steady presence. He said, buffalo because you're very powerful, but he said it is not destructive power. He said the power of the buffalo is restorative power and is life-giving power. So he said, you are the stone buffalo. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool as far as these things go. And that's when I asked him a question. I told him the story I just told you, these shadow men I'd seen and who had impacted me and impacted my life. And he looked very serious. And he said, look, I don't know why you're having these dreams. And I said, well, they were dreams. I was awake. And he put his hand up. He said, no. He said, it's best if we call them dreams. He said, I don't know why you're having these dreams, but I will ask. So he sort of did this, like, again, sort of sing-songy humming thing. He looked around. He shook his head. He reached into his gym bag, which is hanging off the back of his chair, or over the arm of one of his chair, and he pulled out, a recorder like kids play. And it was translated. It was see-through, and it was like purple see-through. And he played the same note, maybe, 10 or 15 times, something like that. And he looked around, shook his head, put the recorder away, and then out of the bag he pulled a maraca. And the maraca was it was gray, and it had Olmeca tequila on the side in faded red lettering. And I remember thinking that if this was like a white guy shaman in the valley, that thing would be hand carved. It cost $4,000. And so he shakes it a few times and he kind of sings as he does it. And he looks around and he said something about a doctor. I didn't catch it, but he got up and walked away. And I thought, oh, are we done? So I sat there for a few more minutes trying to figure out what was happening. And then he comes back and he's got something green in one of his hands. And before I can figure out what it is, he shoves it in my mouth. He says, chew that and swallow it down. So I did. I should say, I realized this was and I really do think this is probably the biggest crossroads of my entire life, was I could either spit this stuff out and go, all right, we're done here, or I could chew it and see what happens. And this was uncharacteristic of me, but I chewed it. And I swallowed it. And he says, is it gone? I nodded. So he had some left in his hand. He put it in his own mouth. He chewed it. And then he grabbed my head, put both his hands on either side of my head, pulled me forward, and went on the top of my head. Bear in mind, busy Starbucks. 6, 8 p.m. on a Sunday evening in a busy metropolitan center. Pulls me forward, goes on the back of my neck. Pulls me forward again. Does the same thing all the way down my back, sits me up, looks at me for a minute and goes, okay, it's done. I said, what's done? He goes, just wait. And as I'm sitting there, I feel this strangeness stealing over me, this sensation that my body is not my own, that it is moving at my suggestion, but it is not mine. It is not me. And I start panicking. I was thinking, okay, so he poisoned me, and there's a hospital not far. If I throw up some of this crap, maybe if I take it to them, they can help me out. And it was almost like he knew what I was thinking, because he just went, calm down. You're fine. Calm down. And I said, Dennis, man, I think you poisoned me, because I didn't poison you. You're going to be fine. It's relaxed. And I remember saying, I said, if I feel like if I try to stand up, I'm going to fall over. He goes, you won't. Stand up to see. I stood up, and I was solid. I said, okay. So I sat back down. And I don't know, 5-10 minutes later, the feeling passed. And he looked at me, he goes, how do you feel? I said, I think I'm fine. He goes, okay, yeah. I said, what was that? He said, well, you had the wrong spirit in you. He said, I removed it, and what you felt was the new spirit settling in. And I said, okay. He's like, do you ever wonder why your belly swells? And I used to be a very, very hefty guy. And I said, well, I assume because I ate too much. And he goes, well, yes. He said, that doesn't help. But he said, this also happens to people who have the wrong spirit in them. He said, now that this is done, he said, your belly will shrink. But he said, you need to know I'm sorry. I said, well, what are you sorry about? He said, your life is going to be different now. And he said, I could not give you a choice in that. This had to be done. I couldn't give you an option of whether or not you wanted it to change. And he said, it's not going to be bad, but it's going to be different. And that is just something that you have to get used to. He said, again, I am sorry, but there was no other choice. I said, oh, okay. And I don't know how to respond to that. And he said, how do you feel? I said, I think I'm okay. He goes, okay, good. He said, I'm going to go have a drink. You take care of yourself. And he got up, he grabbed his cane, he grabbed his bag, and he started walking away. And I said, oh, thanks, I guess. Thanks, man. And he points to the coffee. He said, you're welcome. He said, you gave me a gift. So this is my gift to you. And he walked away, and I never saw him again. But after that, I'm sitting there in front of this busy Starbucks on a busy metropolitan street between 6 and 8 p.m. on a Sunday evening. And I'm thinking, oh boy, there are folks staring. I need to go. So I grabbed my book I've been reading and started walking back to the house, texted my wife, you're not going to believe what just happened. And she said, if you feel okay, which I did, she said, you're probably okay. Don't, just chalk it up to experience and, roll with it. Keep an eye out for like anything that might happen after this. But she said, it sounds like you're okay. And I went back to my room. I was reading for a while and I got really hungry. Like night came on. I was really hungry. And I thought, I've barely eaten today. That's why I feel so weird. That's why I thought, of course. It all makes sense. And so I went out of the house and decided I was going to get my favorite burger joint in Vancouver. Walk out of the house, and man, whereas it was like I had been seeing the world through a window, and now someone had taken out the glass. Because the first car that passed me, I was terrified. And I couldn't explain why. And all of a sudden I could hear everything. I could hear all the cars, the people, the noise, the lights. It was so bright and so loud, and I just started freaking out. And I had to really kind of clamp back down and go, nope, you're fine, just roll with it. And I started walking towards the burger joint. And then I got to Davy, and I looked up Davy, and there's or at least there used to be, I don't know about now, the Sandman Inn and Suites is on Davy. And they got this big green neon sign on the side of the building, or again, they used to. And as I saw that sign hanging there in the dark, and all of a sudden I freaked out again. I was just, there's something about like it's so high up and it's so bright. And just panic came back, so I calmed it back down, went to the burger joint, ordered my usual burger and a Coke, double burger and a Coke. But when it arrived, and I know how this sounds, but this is what it was. When it arrived, I didn't know what to do with it. Like I knew, intellectually, that's a burger. We eat it. That's how we got this fine athletic physique, my guy. But I was like, oh, okay. So I unwrapped it and I peeled off a chunk of it and I ate it. Like, oh yeah, of course, food, yeah, burger, yeah. And I ate about half the burger and it was good. And I took a drink of the soda. I remember it looked like plastic. I took a drink. I'm like, oh, that's very sweet, but yeah, sure, okay. And I, ate it and drank it, and you can have about half of each. And then on the way back, I smelled the plant that he had shoved in my mouth that I couldn't identify. And I picked some. And then I basically tried to find it. And it was juniper. And what I've since learned is that I went through a very stripped down version of a Native American cleansing ceremony. And that feeling, every now and again, some nights I still have it. Some nights it feels like the glass is out of the window. Everything seems very ultra real, ultra, there. And other times it's not. But what's interesting is I have in my life since then twice been approached by shadow creatures, and neither time could they touch me. It's only been, 4 times in 11 years, 12 years. But it seems like after I had my shamanic experience, which is, I guess, what it was, I like to call it my accidental exorcism, it was like it changed something, and they could no longer get to me. They, for whatever reason, there was an interest, but they could not make contact.
Thanks for calling in, Brennan. That's the best cup of coffee you've ever spent money on. If you want to check out more of Brennan's ghost stories, find him on the podcast, The Ghost Story Guys, and his new project, Fear Daily, wherever you get your podcasts. That's all we have this week, folks. Do you have a ghost story? Call 701-484-2666. That's 701-484-2666. Or go to tellmeaghoststory.com and leave your story there. Thank you to all the callers who left messages this week. I'm your host, Michelle Newman, signing off. See you next week.